Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Hello, mate.
Yeah, very good, mate. Very good.
You've got all your Gucci gear now, haven't you?
We've got this mic and these headphones, which are very good. I have to say,
yeah.
But the room's in the right state at the minute. Splitting the room, our spare room. Beck's gonna have her own little salon in there. So,
is she? She's going solo. Is she going to start doing her own thing now?
She's been doing it solo since just before COVID. So it put sort of spanner in the works, but she's been doing it mobile the whole time anyway.
Has she?
Yeah, but now she's like, I kind of want my own space where people can come here and do it, and So she's like, can we take away the podcast room? And I'm like, what?
I've literally just got it set up.
Yeah.
It's literally just how I like it. How does that work in your place then? Not to share too much sort of personal stuff, but is it like one of the shoot off rooms as you come into the house, or do you have to weave through the Johnson household?
Yeah, it's upstairs. It's one of the spare bedrooms, not a spare bedrooms, because when the girls is older, she's probably going to want this as her bedroom, but at the moment, they still get on.
What you guys are looking for is exactly, and this would sound like a dick thing to say, it's not intended to be a dick thing, but we've got two spare rooms off our hallway on the left-hand side of our house. It was an extension done long before we were here. And basically, one of them's a playroom, and one of them's the room I'm in now, which is like a long study. And we've got a couple of desks in here and whiteboards and all the podcast kit sits in here. But I've often looked at these rooms and I'm like, you know what? These are perfect for consulting rooms. They're perfect for massage rooms. They'd be ideal for like anything that requires this. This is basically set up. I think somebody before here must have done something where people walk straight in and shoot straight off into these rooms. And you could totally run like probably two businesses from here. That actually require like in-person physical stuff, but we don't really use them. Well, we use the front one was like we said to the boys when they were first moved in, do they want to make it a games room? Because otherwise we'll put it as Lily's playroom, and they just couldn't decide between themselves what they were going to do with it. So we ended up just letting Lily have it as a playroom, and it's beautiful, and we painted it really nice and put inspiring stuff all over the walls. But last she's like 9, so she doesn't really use it. You know, her and her friends go in there and just make it messy, and then we just tell them to tidy it up, and it's basically just pass through the room, come into the office. So I think it's such a bloody waste, but we're looking to move anyway. So
yeah, nice. Same area, or
you know what, mate? So I did a decade. So I did 10 years, maybe 11 years on the on-call, on the retained, and I never obviously entertained living outside of the area because of obviously old geographical handcuffs, as it were. But I left the retained 3 or 4 years ago, or the on-call, and so I don't need to be in the town. So the quick answer to your question is no, probably. That having been said, I've got a whole bunch of clients around this area, and the horses are quite close to here, and my gym is quite close to here. So we don't need to be in the town. The big goal is to get out of the town. Sounds harsh.
Oh, okay.
But I just want like
no.
I don't necessarily want
feeling,
fields,
mate.
But I don't. My wife wants fields for the horses, and I've got this thing in my head. Do you remember Dallas? Did you ever watch Dallas when you were a kid? It was a little
probably
bit,
a touch before my time,
mate. It was a touch. Same makes sound bad. It was a touch before both of our times, probably. But I used to. My mum got me the box set when I was a kid, and I watched it. And they had this thing where when JR would have breakfast, his like wife had come from one place on the estate, and then his kids had come from another place on the estate, and they'd ride in on horses, and they'd come to breakfast at the JR household. So I have that kind of thing where like my wife has to go off in the morning and see to the horses, and then I'll go to the gym or whatever, and then we come home again. But I'd quite like it where it's all kind of in the same place. You know, we have like a converted barn just out the front for the gym, and then horses can be stabled at the house, and you know, but we want a smaller house. We don't need a house that's this big anymore, because our eldest has moved out. I'm super excited and optimistic that our second eldest will move out in the not too distant future as well. I'm not sure how much of that optimism is shared, and then it'll just be me and the girls. So we've got a spare ping pong room upstairs that we never use now, and we've got these 2 spare rooms off the hallway which we don't bloody use. So you just sort of bumble about it, really. which is a nice problem to have. But we just don't need the space. And I know there's a bunch of people that would just use this space a lot better. We want more space, but smaller house. If that makes sense. We want land, but a smaller house. Problem with a lot of land, they come with bigger houses. We don't need a bigger house. Yeah. People like big houses, so they can wave them with it like an ego flow. Look at my big house. Yeah, you know what? Yeah. Done that. It doesn't really interest me. I did that with lots of stuff though. And you know what? I feel like we're going to jump straight headfirst into something here where we're like, what is that aspect of people that we want the thing we think we want because of why we want it and what it will say of us to have achieved it? And I think there's an addiction thing within me that I'm constantly chasing that goal, and then I get it. And I think I'm kind of out of this habit now, hopefully. But I've done it with cars, I've done it with motorbikes, I did it with a house, I've done it with businesses where I'm like, I'm going to build this big thing, and then I build it and I'm like, meh, bored now. Have you ever had that?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to speak to my other half, she'd be saying, you're always, right, what's next? What's next? What's next? You're not, are we not enough here? Is that not enough? What we've got here, we've got...
That's an interesting concept.
I feel like I wasted so much of my 20s with my, not so much my mental health problems at the time, because I didn't put it down to that. I put it down to me being useless with money, and I had no money for anything. So now I'm a bit more successful with money, and I'm trying to learn as quickly as I can because I feel like I've lost time. I'm on to the next thing straight away. Next thing, the charity swim. And I'm like, right, I'm pushing for my EFAD so I can do that, this, that, and the other.
You just did your EFAD, didn't you? You did a 2-week EFAD. Yeah. You passed like a few days ago.
Yeah, literally yesterday.
Congratulations, my man. How did you find it?
Yeah, thank you, mate. Yeah, it was good. So I had about 7-10 days before that course commenced. I took a week's sick leave. It'd been a stressful few weeks. We've got a lot of stuff going on at home, which is unlike me to just book it off. But as you'll know, having spent time retained, if you've got other stuff going on, then you get back from your whole-time job. The last thing you want to be doing is those tones going down.
Yeah.
And I just reached a point where I was like, I need a break. So I took some time off, concentrated on what matters at home, and spent some time with the girls. And then I hadn't even looked at the joining instructions for this course. I just knew I had to be at the training centre on Monday morning.
Yeah.
So I went there, they turned up, and they're like, so we've got this exam for you. Here it is, 70 questions. I think it was highway code, roadcraft, and signs.
Was that a paper one, or did you have to was it an interactive one that you couldn't, how did you have to do it? Was it paper-based? Okay.
Yeah, paper-based. And they said, they're all lovely there. They're really, really good, what do you call them?
Yeah, facilitators, trainers, whatever.
Really good training centre crew there. They know this. And they said, look, you will get an opportunity to take it again later in the course. But they said, this 2-week course is very intensive. And they said, we don't want you stressing about this exam. So do your best. And I'd already said to them, look, I haven't studied for this at all. They give me the books that I was meant to get 8 weeks before. I think they turned up 2 weeks before.
Nice.
I said, I've had other stuff going on. Anyway, somehow I got through it, and I passed that. So I obviously know the highway code and stuff better.
Yeah.
It was the roadcraft. It's like a police handbook. Handbook roadcraft.
Yeah, I remember it.
That was the one I scored less on, but it wasn't too bad. So we got through that, and then I know different counties do it differently. We have 4 days in a response car that's manual, so they get you to learn the systems of control of the vehicle. Slowing down for bends and limit points and all that stuff. And then last Friday into the truck. Mate, I absolutely loved it. It was tough. Like Monday, Tuesday this week was 2 till 10:30 at night, so you do nighttime driving as well. My biggest thing was he said, you're very cautious, which he said, I'd rather you be that way. I just didn't put a lot of faith in the truck initially. We've got Scania Euro 6 rescue pumps, which is what I was trained in as well.
Yeah, we had Scanias, but we learnt on a couple of we had a Volvo we learnt on, and we also have like a big range change. I'm going to get this wrong, but I think it was 6 up, 6 down, horrible bloody box lorry that we also learnt on.
I don't even think you learn. I mean, my my HGV I done was in automatic. I don't think they do it. It's a separate thing now.
Did you do response driving in automatic? Out of curiosity.
This was my response driving.
Yeah, I know, but EFAD, I mean, when you actually did your EFAD response assessment, your actual exam, did you do it in automatic?
Yeah.
Controversial. I think that is very controversial, only because, and this is not, we're not getting anybody in trouble. Nobody knows what brigades are from anyway. But when I do mine, so I'm reaching back now. How long have I been driving the trucks? 11 years, probably 11 years. Yeah, I think about 11 years. I did it when I was 11 years, and we learned that, and this is still the case now because I did a refresher maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the idea of the pendulum effect with the water and the baffles in the tank and that sort of stuff. And we would change all the way down to 1, then change back up to 2 every time we came into a roundabout or something like that, so that the vehicle doesn't. So if you sit in automatic, the vehicle will obviously naturally change up or down to suit the speed and most economical driving and all that sort of stuff. But if it changes down whilst you're halfway around a roundabout, you risk that pendulum effect as the vehicle changes gears, and then it sloshes itself a little bit about, and there's a potential danger, obviously, of you losing control of the vehicle a little bit. So you pre-select second, I'm pretty sure it was. I'm getting this wrong now. No, you pre-select second, yeah. So as you're coming into the roundabout, you'd go, see, you response driving 4th, you're approaching the roundabout, blues go on, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, as in you flick down on the right-hand side on the paddles, and then flick back up to 2. So you pre-select 2. And then as you're approaching the junction, it will naturally change itself down, but it won't go lower than 2. So you'll enter the junction at 2, but it won't change back up. So as you start to, you pick your position in, you come into it, and as you start to speed up as you come out of the roundabout, it won't naturally kick itself up into 3rd and throw you about. That might be a slight variation, but I know it was something they were really, really heavy on. Now, a lot of people do drive constantly in automatic. A lot of the fire engines now are like big go-karts, aren't they, basically? But whenever we set our refreshers or anything like that, the company line is, when you're doing EFAD, do you drive in automatic? No, boss. No, never. Absolutely not. Of course I don't. I do.
Really?
I drive. Yeah, that's it. Because
so
they suggest you haven't got, they say you haven't got control of the vehicle.
Wow. Yeah, so there is the option for Tiptronic controls of the truck. To do like a cockpit drill and say everything that the vehicle can do and all the buttons, etc. We did, we touched Tiptronic the whole way through. I mean, when we done the 4 days in the car, I did ask him, I said, what's the, it's a manual XC60, lovely car. We run on blues as well. And I said, what's the purpose of this? Like, it's a bit strange, isn't it? Going from a car that is very quick, going up to a big 13, 14 ton truck. And he said it's that system of when you get in a truck, judging your speed by braking, people tend to then, their confidence goes up higher than their ability, and then they end up going around corners too far, which is a natural thing that can happen the longer you're driving. Putting them in the car, in a manual car, they get rid of you doing gear brake overlap, and they get you to get down to the speed you need to be for the roundabout, and then change gear. So I think it's more just just to understand the controls of a car and a vehicle a bit better.
So did you do a standard HGV thing first before you then went into your EFAD? You did that?
Yeah, so I've done that last year.
How was
probably
that?
Around the same time last year.
How long was that?
A week.
How did you find it? Did you have to do it by yourself, or did you do it with another person, like learning at the same time?
Yeah, I think I'd done it with someone else. Yeah, I did, in Stevenage way, so it's in a different area.
Because like you just said there, when you're doing your response this time, you did it from 2 o'clock till 10 o'clock at night, 8 hours of driving. Yeah,
and funny enough, the guy, so I didn't do a solid 8 hours. We obviously went round to different counties, and we stopped at some of our stations for lunch and breaks and a debrief after every 1.2 and 1.4 run and stuff like that. The guy I was meant to be doing it with, this EFAD course, got COVID, so it ended up just being me.
Oh, mate, that's brutal. Thanks for coming back and listening to the Firefighters Podcast. This one was brought to you by William Wood Watches. William Wood Watches, as I'm sure you're already aware, are the makers of those incredibly authentic watches with a piece of firefighting history in every single one. On the 9th of June, they created 250 beautiful limited edition pieces of the bravest watch for the FDNY Foundation. They're donating 15% from every single watch to the FDNY Foundation, and it's pretty incredible to see that William Wood Watches are now in the Rockefeller Center, the FDNY Fire Zone store that's held within Rockefeller Center. On the 9th of June, they will be having one of their watches, which is going to press William Wood Watches into the history of FDNY. Johnny and the team are over there kicking ass and taking names. Be sure to join them on their journey. Head over to williamwoodwatches.com. Check them out on Instagram. Check them out on YouTube. You can check all of their watches right there, from the Jubilee to the Triumph to the Valium to the Bronze to the Chivalrous, and they run competitions supporting firefighters charities all over the world, including the Firefighters charity in the UK. I really struggled. I kept falling asleep in the back when I'd swap over with the other. But I mean, I was just being open. I'm driving bores me to tears. And if we're not on blues, with the greatest respect to lorry drivers, I'm like a glorified lorry driver, and I'm like, I hate this. I just hate it. Yeah. You know, I'm lucky enough that in my role now I don't drive anymore, but I maintain the skill set in case, because of like COVID or strikes or whatever, we need to go on the pumps, but I don't enjoy it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was quite keen to do it. I'm my 33 now. I had my like yearly review with the watch manager appraisal. That's it. And he sort of said, you know, what do you want to do? And I said, really want to do my driving. He was like, they might not go for it at this point in time. And funnily enough, we were desperate for them now.
Mate, absolutely. Everybody should do it. It was always a dream of mine. I think anybody that says they don't have an ambition to drive a fire engine, that is just BS. Do you know what I mean? I wanted to do it, mate. I absolutely loved it when I started doing it. Absolutely loved it. The positioning, the high riding positioning when you're out there on the road, it's absolutely awesome. And you're right. So this is like a really important thing, and I want to ask you about this probably, is we don't pay an enhancement to drivers. I don't believe, and I'm stretching now, but I don't think anywhere in the UK Fire and Rescue Service do we pay. Whereas in America and stuff like that, it's an additional skill set. You know, if you're a driver, it's an enhancement because you are taking a lot more risk. And we're starting to find ourselves in a bit of a position now in the UK Fire Service where we're getting a lot of recruits that don't, strangely enough, some of them don't even drive. You know what I mean? We actually made a mistake in my brigade where we forgot to say that it was a mandatory expectation that you have a driving license before you, and even now, right?
I think
you can join without a driving license as long as you commit to getting one within the first 6 or 12 months, which is in itself an absolute ridiculousness. Because if I employ you now, a UK Fire and Rescue Service, I'm going to spend maybe 30k on you just to get you trained and up to spec. I'm going to fit you for all your PPE. I'm going to put you through admin and all that cost and create you as an employee on my books. I'm going to set your everything up. I'm going to set your blooming pension up and everything like that. And then you've got 6 months of it. If you don't do it, what am I going to do? I'm going to sack you, am I?
Yep.
Don't think you will. you haven't got enough people. No. But we can't make people do it. So there's a bunch of people now, especially when drivers are getting pinged or they're having little incidents here and there where people are like, you know what, I don't fancy driving anymore. And people just throw their tickets in. And you're like, we're gonna have to create an incentive for people to actually want to drive.
Oh yeah, I mean they were, as I said before, the 3 guys in the driver training section of Feds Fire, because it's all done in house. You've got Paul Tracy, who the other 2 say hands down is the best driver trainer in the country. He used to work at police driver training school, whatever it's called, and they're all lovely. And when we're going through the theory stuff at the beginning of the week, he said, right, you see this link here? He said that takes you to the driving at work policy. He said it's about that thick. He said just have a little look over that at some point. In the case you saying, obviously it's a skill and there's a bigger risk because if something happens while you're out there on that road, you're going to want to know what it says in there, because it'll be one of these things where if you end up, something happens on the road and you end up getting taken to court. If you get off and no charge, the governors, group commanders and that will have their arm around your shoulder going, never doubted you.
How'd you about
if you get done for it, they won't want anything to do with you. They won't be seen in anything. They won't be covering you.
Pessimist. No, you're right, mate. You're right, and that's where
that's what he said.
And I think we should acknowledge people because it's tough. I mean, especially on call and or whole time, but certainly whole time where pump gets called out and you're going somewhere in the middle of the night, or you're just swapping stations because you need to send a cover pump there. Everybody else piles on, falls asleep, and then the driver drives you 40 minutes in that direction. And has to be awake all the time and blah, 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 blah. I think it's a massive demand on that. And like you say, the risk aspect to it, as from myself, like as an incident commander, all you can ask the other person to do is stop. If you think they're driving dangerously, you can tell them to stop. I should never, I don't, but I do say incident commanders who drive as well, who micromanage driving, and they'll be like, oh, mate, you need to slow down a bit, or you need to do this a bit, or, we need to make progress, or, that's where it's a real self-confidence thing where individuals need to be able to say,
yeah,
I'm driving. Yeah, I'm driving. I've passed my driving thing. And unless I do something dangerous, They shouldn't be leaning over, and I think it's a hell of a demand. It's a hell of a responsibility for drivers.
Yeah, big trust that you've got faith in that truck. You know what it's capable of.
Yeah.
And obviously it's different. So, for instance, you go to your initial BA course. You've never worn BA before, but you're on your initial BA course. You get taught how to wear BA and how to go into the risk area. It's a new skill. You've got that added thing with driving of you've got a load of bad habits, so that starts getting picked up. You've got to work your way out of them.
Yeah.
And obviously, you go into a risk area. Yes, you've got the unknown of if you're going to a house fire, how's the fire going to react? But you obviously get taught that. What you can't control is what people are going to do when they see blue lights behind them on the road or in front of you, and they end up stopping side by side. And
mate, and for a lot of people, it's just white noise as well, And this was something I actually wanted to ask you about because I didn't necessarily speak about it prior to coming on. But this aspect of how busy and hectic life is nowadays, compounded with everybody's fears and anxieties and their lack of ability to hold attention with certain things, when they hear or when just blue lights, when we're going up behind people now, do you ever feel, even just when you were observing from the back seat or anything like that, people just don't seem to respond in the same way that they used to? People are just oblivious. It's just white noise to them.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I've even done it. I know where, prior to this, I might have been on a dual carriageway, and obviously, a bit more knowledge now. I know that generally the two tones get turned off on the dual carriageway because you can't hear them anyway. It's going backwards.
Yeah.
And I used to think sometimes I've been caught out with police up my arse, and I'm going, oh God, I couldn't even hear them. It's gone out of the way. But then there's the others that sort of they can't make up. They see it and they either sort of stop or they'll go drop down to 30 mile an hour and just keep going with their indicator on, like go past. It's like you're looking for that reaction, aren't you? And obviously, just give them the benefit of the doubt. They don't know what we want them to do.
Yeah.
But for us, it's best if they just completely stop and we can work our way through, isn't it? So
yeah, I heard a great analogy from a driving instructor, and he uses this thing about stick down the river. I don't know if your driver, have you heard that before? It was a great analogy, right? You never played poo sticks, where you stand on a bridge and drop a stick. You ever played that game? Yeah, poo sticks. You drop a stick and then you watch it go down the river. He talks about driving in that capacity. So he says, as an emergency services driver, you should never stop, theoretically. That's an exaggeration to some people. If you need to stop, it's dangerous, stop. But you should never stop. You should be part in the waves. As you should be anticipating things, 30, 40 seconds ahead of you, giving them those indications. Like you've said, okay, blue lights are on. Okay, I'm getting a response. I'm going to get a response. No, they're within my window. I'm going to pip them with the tones. Tones go on, single set of tones. Okay, I've got a response. Tones go off. I change my position and I'm anticipating something coming the other way. I'm moving over far enough to isolate the gap so people don't keep proceeding. And it's that the whole idea of the stick down the river is it should just glide through nice and slowly. It should just be gliding through. It shouldn't get up behind something and have to stop. That should never be the case. You should be anticipating it. And even when you're like rolling into, a clear red light crossroads or something like that, you should be fully anticipating and coming right down. Okay, 15, 10, 5, counting the junctions, 1, 2, moving back out, 2 tones, come off, take speed back up to third, fourth, and away you go. And that's just that seamless, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Versus people that bang on the anchors, scream, shout, get out of the way, lean out the window, move, we need to make progress, bullying people through junctions, which is just dangerous because people assume that we've got some sort of special rules. People don't realize that we're actually exempt. So we're not exempt from anything, are we? We actually follow all of the same rules that everybody else follows.
Yeah.
And there's just a few contraindications depending on the situation. But like you say, you have no right of way as such. You have no priority. You can't force people into junctions or anything like that. And I think we're getting into a position where it can be a little bit scary because, like you say, the public aren't reacting in the same way that they used to. And I do worry about it, especially as it's becoming less and less attractive to people. We need to find a way of making it a little bit more appealing. But like you say, people such as yourself clearly still interested in doing it. So we can't be doing it all wrong. I wanted to have you on again because we've spoke before. I loved the last conversation that we had, but something that I just wanted to catch people up on is the fact that you've now been running a successful podcast for probably you're over a year now, aren't you?
Did you say successful?
Yes. Jesus. Self-belief. Man, you ever run a successful podcast? I know
It's
people
getting
that
there.
have people that don't know I know you. I have heard of it and listened to it. And I think that's really admiring because there's so many people who started up podcasts during lockdown. I was looking at some Ofcom stats recently, and it says that roughly 1 in 5 people listen to a weekly podcast, and 78% of those people listen to like discussion-based podcasts, which obviously includes yours. But despite the industry that's still growing and growing and growing and growing and growing, a lot of people haven't continued doing it past the end of lockdown. I think it was kind of a knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people to keep their businesses going, that they started a podcast of some form, but through their own challenges or whatever, they've decided not to continue with it. And I wonder if there's something that is specific about the fact that you do the guest-based podcasts and the fact that it is focused in and around so much of the breaking out of purgatory, the mental health challenges that people are facing, and the fact that we know talking about these issues makes it much more receptive to people and allows people to sort of feel free to have those discussions. How have you found it since you started?
Yeah, it's been like I say, we're in a funny world at the moment with COVID. It hasn't gone away, and it's now coming back and
back with a vengeance. Round three.
That's crazy, mate. Crazy. I mean, the very first idea I had to do it was actually before lockdown. I don't think we're in full lockdown, and I might have said it to you before. I approached my cousin, who still isn't really in a position that he wants to come and do something like this and talk about mental health, and my mate Mark. That was the plan, thinking of, I don't know, True Geordie and stuff like that. In my head, I'm like, studio, round a table.
Yeah.
It's a serious subject, but we should also be able to have a laugh and have a chat and stuff like that. I didn't have a plan out what I was doing or how I did it or how to set up recording or anything like that. So I just went about it, started getting more contacts as I went through. Obviously, most videos I do where I'm thanking supporters and stuff like that. I've got a more recent one, Bigger Box Productions, have been helping me out. Another fellow firefighter. You, Stoke and Vent have all been. That's the thing that's hit me the most, is how nice the community is.
A quick reminder for all of our listeners of our monthly giveaway. Now, as part of our partnership with Hikes, Rosenbauer and Tallyman, we give away that little bit extra to our podcast listeners every single month. You can get 2 personalized BA tallies. These are hardware and they've got your own name on them, they've got your own service number on them, and they have the podcast logo on the back. And then for the juicy stuff, Hikes give away a pair of their incredible footwear. And some of the stuff is pretty expensive stuff, to be honest with you. We try and switch it and change it every month. We are guided by the gods of Hikes to make sure we are giving you exactly what you need for that time of year. So it might be boots, it might be trainers. And then once every quarter, our good friends over at Rosenbauer are giving away their Boris B5 firefighting boots as well. So to be in with a chance to win, jump over to our social media platforms or YouTube, where you need to tag a member of the emergency services in the post, be following our page, and you will be in with a chance to win at the end of every single month. Back to the show.
Oh, it's
and how good it is. Yeah,
global,
it's brilliant.
Well.
I love it.
It's like a global village. I absolutely love it. There's so many incredible people out there that when you lift out the box. But given that it's based around mental health, is there something about that aspect of, like you say, you intended to start with other people and we were going to have this adventure, and you still are having your own adventure, but obviously I do a lot of this sort of stuff, and sometimes do you feel like you're speaking into the void? You're not on a stage at the end of the day. You are you're speaking into the abyss.
100%. I mean, I felt like after midway my EFAD, I released that episode last week where I sort of talked about what I was planning to do. Obviously, a meeting up with you, doing an episode with you, what I wanted to achieve next year. And I videoed it as well, and I thought I can take some clips from that. And I just thought, I had that down moment for sort of 20 minutes. I thought, nah, I'm not putting that up. Like, who's going to listen to that?
How do you cope with those valleys?
And yeah.
Because that is a valley, mate, and like you say, you can find yourself in there. It feels like you're sitting in a puddle of shit, splashing it, going out.
Yeah, it's tough sometimes. Whatever. I've probably got 5 or 6 people that I approached this year about doing episodes, and some good ones as well. And they've either been put on the back burner because I haven't been dedicating enough time to this. As in, it's what I said to my other half. I said, next year, like on one of my days off, I need to treat it as a work day for the podcast. Because at the minute, I just I'm at work, I'll have 10 minutes, I'd love to do something with them, I'll message them.
Yeah.
but the fact is, when I have done episodes, and for example, not even episodes, when I've done the swimming, the reception I got from that blew me away. Like, I never expected.
Just double click on that, because I know we've had you on before, but I don't think, and obviously we shared a lot of the content that you did just before. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but just double click on what you did, because I thought that was fairly colossal. Because you spent it was 24 hours or a couple of days. Tell people what you did.
So basically, swim for dementia for Alzheimer's Society. You could pick any challenge you wanted. I mean, you could swim a mile, and it was over 30 days. So you could, but even if you do, so I picked 10 miles. Over 30 days is 26 laps, 26 lengths a day, which I knew from the start. That's why initially when I looked at it, I thought, there's no way I'm going to get to a swim pool every day.
I know.
Because I've got work, I'm on call, I've got the kids, clubs, all that sort of stuff. I thought, there's no way. I ended up doing it, I think it was 7, maybe a few more, maybe 9 days I've done it. With everything, and this is at a time when it wasn't just my work. I had stuff going on at home. It was a stressful time, which is why I didn't get more than 10.5 miles. So I reached the target. I was pleased I did that, and we raised a lot of money for the good cause. But the relief once I'd reached that was like, because obviously I'd done a lot of posts about it. I'm going to be doing this challenge, this, that, and the other.
That's it.
For me to then, I know, some things are more important, but for me, I'd put that out there. I needed to do it.
Public accountability. So really good. It's really good to do it.
So got that done, and I thought, okay, I'd love to do another 10 miles in the 15, 20 days I've got left or whatever it is, but actually there's something else that needs my focus right now.
How did you find it when you were doing all that swimming? Because speaking about, there's something I made a note about, which we're going to talk to you about later, but it's relevant now, is when I've had bouts of different things in my life, and we've spoke a little bit about the valleys that you pass through at different times, I often think about feeling underwater when you have those moments, because it's about that sort of screaming into the void. It's a bit like you're shouting underneath a film of something that no one else can hear, and that for me, I've never wanted to do. Well, actually, that's a lie. I've wanted to do some sort of swim challenges and stuff like that, but I don't like the idea of being alone with my thoughts for a prolonged period of time like that, because I know you can get some Gucci headphones and all that sort of stuff where people listen to stuff when they're swimming, but it's a very, very solo, isolated, strange way to do it. Have you ever heard of mental health challenges compared to something like that? Because it's something I heard somebody else say. It wasn't my word. Someone else said it. And when they said it, I thought, God, you're right. A little bit like if you were sat on the bottom of a pool screaming and no one can hear what's going on. And I think, having been addicted to things in the past, and that's kind of like a secret superpower as to how I tend to be able to apply myself to things, because it's actually a bit of a sickness. I do it so that I don't spend a lot of time.
100%. I get
it. Do you know what I mean? Was there anything in that when you looked at that swimming?
It wasn't. What's the word? It wasn't fun. I had a lot to concentrate on because I can swim. I've got no problem swimming. I can throw the kids in the pool and I can swim. I've done the odd length here or there before, but I'm like, I haven't got a technique. I haven't done swimming since I think I was in lower school last time I'd done proper swimming. So I was sort of learning on the job, and I thought it's not meant to be easy. And for those that maybe look at it and go, he's only doing 10 miles, that's easy for someone who can swim a breaststroke properly and stuff like that. I was just going in with it and giving my best. So the majority of the time I had that, I was just trying to focus on being better each time I went in, going a bit further. I had the watch, so that for me was a challenge. Right, tonight I'm going to go further than I did last night, whatever. But obviously I had a personal reason for doing the challenge as well, which was for my nan who's suffering with dementia. So I suppose I carried quite a bit of guilt through that challenge as well, because along through COVID, I hadn't seen her, and it literally to the point where before COVID, when I saw her, she knew who I was. When I went back, she didn't. And also my granddad, my granddad probably wanted to see his grandkids or great grandkids, and he hadn't seen them. But with COVID and that, we didn't want to go around and risk her getting worse or getting COVID. And that's what this has done to us. So I had a lot of stuff I was thinking about, and then I had my own stresses in the final few days of it that I had going on at home. Whether or not it's healthy or not is another matter, but I just try and get my head down and
try and define health, because you made a point there, and we don't want to make this into a COVID conversation by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the counter cost of so many things is rarely ever quantified, and the COVID's a wonderful example, because we speak about the cost being, well, we've got to do this, otherwise people are going to die. Okay, yeah, okay, I get that. It's very easy to understand. It's not easy to do, like so many things, but it's easy to understand. But we don't have the counter cost. We don't look at the counter cost, which is I've got a daughter, I've got two of the boys, you've got two young girls. What's the cost there? The cost impact on their development, the cost impact on a friend of mine, similar to yourself, as his mum, his granddad passed away a couple of years ago, so his mum's been on her own for quite some time. And when this whole thing started, he was going around dropping, groceries off at the end of the driveway and all that sort of jazz. And she was sort of ringing them from the bloody house, and they were in the car. Oh, Granny, yeah, hi, how you doing? You all right? Yeah, what you been up to? Blah, blah, blah. And she said to him, maybe 2 or 3 months into it, how long do you think this is going to be going on? And he said, oh, well, I don't know. 2 or 3 months later, still having the same conversation. And she said, I don't know if I want to live like this, So the cost of me coming out of this, and I'm not encouraging anybody to throw caution to government guidance or anything like that, but the cost of me coming out of this might be that I might catch something that may or may not bring my life to an early end. But she says, if this is living, I'm not sure I want to live like this, I'm not sure I wouldn't rather risk it, because if I can exist without having contact with anybody else, is that really an existence? A little bit like the old saying, a life lived without love isn't life at all. A life that you've lived without any contact with anybody else. We're designed to have contact with each other. We're chemically designed that or oxytocin, everything that pulls us together. That's why we're pack animals. We want to be together. We chemically get rewarded for doing it. So, trying to sustain an existence where we don't have regular contact is kind of a betrayal of our base instincts. And when she said that, it really hit me like a ton of bricks. She later just wore a mask everywhere and started engaging with the children, because she was like, I'd rather live 6 months, like this, than another 10 years on my own.
And I think half the problem with that, and I'm not going to go into the government stuff too much, because no doubt it's been a challenging time for decision making and stuff like that over the last couple of years.
We have a very, very luxurious place to sit on the sidelines and throw stones, so that's not what we're doing.
No. I just think we never get the facts anymore. People never know the facts, or there's always misinformation out there everywhere you look. So we're at this stage where everyone's like, either it's not as serious as they're making out, or whatever. So I'm not bothered. And then there's the others that are just like, I've spent 2 years locked down, I'm not doing it again. So my other half, we were probably more cautious than most when it first came around. I think 5 days before they done the Christmas lockdown last year, whatever it was, we both said, actually, do you know what? Because we'd done homeschooling during lockdown so much anyway, and they were saying there's going to be a lockdown coming, we just pulled them out. And they said, the schools haven't been shut yet. And we're like, yeah, we're bringing them home, because my wife's very good at doing homeschooling, and it's come up to Christmas. We'd rather not risk it. But I could see a similar thing happening this year. And she's like, no, I'm not doing it again. Her mum's older, a generation older than my mum, really. So she's like, no, we're not doing it. We're not. And everyone's just fed up of it, aren't they? Do you know what I mean?
I'm the same. I am the same. Honestly, mate. But again, I'm a freak. I don't speak for the vast majority of the population, and this is not. I have a different opinion only because I have a different opinion with a lot of stuff. I'm ready for Mad Max. Do you know what I mean? I'm ready for that, brother. I've got the gym and where I live, and I
take a leading role,
mate. I get in ice baths every day. I am that guy. Okay, I'm living on the edge of the spectrum anyway, so I would by no means encourage people to do a lot of the other stuff I do, and I believe it costs me a lot as well. I've lived a fairly secluded life for a very long time. I always say to people, and I always get these two ones wrong, but I am social. I'm incredibly sociable, but I'm not social. Yeah. So, I mean, the podcast is a great example, or anything like that. You put me in a group of people, I will be making friends with everybody. I will high five people on the bus on the way home. Do you know what I mean? You put me in a group, I will make friends straight away. I'll ask inquisitive questions, probably to the extent that will annoy them. I love being around people, but I don't actively seek it by any stretch of the imagination. A perfect day to me is spent in almost complete seclusion. I'll go to the gym, I'll train some clients, I'll have a chat with a few people, but I will spend 80% of my day listening to audiobooks by myself, do the school run, cook for the kids, do my gym stuff, do my podcast stuff, and do the fire service stuff. I don't want that other aspect of it, because so many people are engaging with all that noise that I just can't engage with.
And I think that, I mean, you would have seen from some of my posts in that, and I think I even said it to you on the podcast before, consistency for me, whether it's the podcast or whether it's going to the gym, because since I've had that time off sick and been doing the driving and stuff like that, I mean, I've shrunk. But the consistency for me is something I'm still seeking. And maybe that way you go about your daily business, you got your family balance. Because to me, it looks like you're churning out podcasts all the time, like good quality podcast episodes as well with these guests. I don't know how you find all these guests.
I just annoy everybody until they say yes. No, we've turned the tide now. A lot of people send a lot of emails in, but go on, sorry. And
then obviously your PT, and I know you obviously your whole time, and you got family as well.
Oh, we
sometimes I get, I'm like, how do I fit it in? I mean,
3 horses, and we've got a caravan company, and we've got a couple of dogs, and we do know end of stuff. But there's freedom in discipline. This is what I always say to people: if you don't apply discipline to yourself, life is going to apply it. All right, life is going to apply a shit ton of discipline if you do not impose it upon yourself. It's a great Stoic and monk philosophy about choose your misery. You can have the misery of regret, or you can have the misery of applying that constant discipline to yourself. But there's freedom in one of them. There's freedom in self-discipline. Learn to discipline yourself so that you don't have to be reactive. You're not like a tree in the wind that's constantly adapting to the blowing gales of left and right.
Yeah.
You are grounded. You've driven those roots. You've dug and dug and dug with your goddamn teeth and your fingernails to get that discipline in place, to the extent that you've then got so much freedom around it, because you've got these columns. You've got these absolute columns in your life that you don't allow yourself to be blustered around by all the other noise.
Actually, I suppose it does actually lead us on to this report you sent me a few weeks back.
Sorry,
and obviously
I've been talking 40+ minutes yet.
No,
to any of it yet.
The reason I say that is because there's a lot of stats in there, and this is when we talk about discipline when we're put into a pandemic scenario and frontline services are under a lot of strain, and then you go to the individual, each person, how they keep that discipline anyway. If they might have been the most disciplined person in the world, then all of a sudden they're being told, we need you back in, we need you back in. And then obviously the extra levels of stress that come with that. But I mean, I'll let you lead on it.
Mate, and I'll just double click on what you're saying there for 1 second, which is that people have to be able to maintain a certain element of self-sufficiency. I think you should have your own first aid kit for your mind. It's all about discussions and it's all about gaining support from other people, but you should have a few go-to sustainable ways of balancing your life. Even just as small as I have a reset bag, right? So I've got a 511 tactical bag that carries all my stuff in it. It's got head torches, there's bloody masks in it at the minute, unfortunately. There's always a pack of rice cakes in there. There's always two 2-litre bottles of water in there. There's backup phone chargers in there. There's my toothbrush in there. I've always got a large amount of, well, not a large amount, probably shouldn't say that. I've got some cash in there. And, there's
a go bag.
Torches. It's a go bag, mate. And every time I get back, there's a spare pair of underwear in there. There's a towel in there. And every time I get back to the house, I reset. Do you know what I mean? Anything I've eaten, anything I've drank, there's a protein bar or something in there, I will reset that bag and I am good to go. Right. I've always got a pair of trainers with me or something like that. So I could pretty much go anywhere. There's always a sleeping bag in the truck and I'd be fine for a couple of days, whether I get called somewhere else. And you have to have that self-sustaining mindset. We've celebrated a lot of minimalism and stuff like that, and there's probably a balance somewhere in between where you don't want to be. I know people that have got in hydration packs underneath their car, and they've got the ability to live without water for a few days because they can recycle it. All this sort of stuff. I'm not talking about swinging the pendulum to that extent, but you should be able to sustain your own life. You should be able to have a process of looking after yourself physically, mentally. So that when, as we echo back to that discipline, when things start going belly up and the water starts rising, can you swim? Do you know what I mean? Can you swim by yourself? Otherwise, you just start frantically flailing around and screaming and scrambling on top of each other. And that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing. People that have not disciplined themselves emotionally, financially, and it's so uncomfortable, even just physically. Do you know what I mean? It's so uncomfortable, this whole fat shaming stuff, where people are like, oh, well, you should be a little bit more fitter and healthy and you'll probably be all right. That's very offensive, isn't it, Pete? That's very rude. Well, so you've had the advice for the last 40 years. Drink more water, get exercise 3 times a week. This isn't rocket science, guys. We've gone from a time where, we spent 80 years with a lack of food and nutrition and stuff like that. And now we're finally in a place where we have an abundance of food and we have an abundance of everything. Everything is an abundance and everything is disposable. And we just can't seem to stop ourselves. We just cannot stop ourselves. We overindulge on everything. And it does not just the physical aspects. We overindulge in technology and it has a massive counter cost.
Yeah.
All right. I wanted to get on to, because you've had some incredible guests on, and I wanted to ask you about some of the common themes. There's 2 favorite podcast episodes that you've done that I really do want to speak to you about, and then another one perhaps later on if we get a chance. The first was an episode you did back in June with a gentleman called Steve. He was, funnily enough, was a firefighter as well. Now, he'd spent about a decade of suffering with some verbal and some physical challenges that I wanted you to sort of try and expand on, and he went into, well, I remember listening back to it. He was in a pretty dark place at one point in time.
Steve was a contact I got through the brigade. He wasn't an operational firefighter. He's a property maintenance there.
Yeah.
In Bedfire, and he won't mind me talking about it. But yeah, he I can't remember if it was his second relationship, and just it was all good for a few years. Happy, no problems whatsoever. And then I think they were trying for a child. I'm not sure he was overly on board, but he loved her and he wanted to make her happy, and so they sort of came to that decision that let's try it, and it didn't happen, and then in the stress from that happening, it quickly turned, and he started getting abused emotionally, I suppose, initially, and then it just cascaded from there. I mean, I think he was having cigarettes flicked at him. I think he got pushed down the stairs at some point in time. It wasn't a good time. And all this time happening, he didn't talk to anyone. It's obviously amazing to have him on talking about that. Him coming forward for the brigade and talking about it, knowing that all his colleagues and that are going to hear it for the first time and not know anything about it. It's like, what a guy.
I think it's a lot more common than people think it is as well, though, because male pride and those aspects there, we almost feel like we're losing face in our community if we do reach out for help, especially with something such as that. But it's a really difficult thing to even comprehend, because just speaking for myself, I've never been put in a position where I've had to worry about that sort of physical violence from a loved one, and it's such a counter thing for somebody you've been so vulnerable with as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he talked so honestly about it when we were talking. Then even there was another person in the room actually from occupational health who turned up, and I didn't know they were coming. And the whole idea was that he's telling his story for the first time. We hadn't actually met in person until that time. So, but in fairness to him, he cracked on, carried on.
How did you handle that pressure? Because that must have been intense for you. It must have been a bit surreal.
It was, and I tried to stick to the fact that I might not be the world's best interviewer and know the right things to say, but one, I hope that then it comes across as genuine, and two, as long as I'm respectful and treat him with dignity, then hopefully I will come across okay talking to him, and it won't be, did you hear what he said to that bloke when he just said he tried to take his own life? Did you see his face or something like that? At the end of the day, we're all, not all, majority of us are all decent human beings, aren't we? And as long as we treat other human beings with respect.
That's why I think what you do is so powerful, because, I talk to people about loads of different stuff, but you know what? Some of it is really safe ground. You know what I mean? We're talking about the pumps, or I'm talking to a paramedic about something, or I'm talking to a chief of police or a chief fire officer about something. You know what? They are bang smack in the middle of their comfort zone. Yeah, I mean, public speaking is fairly scary for a lot of people, but you are navigating thin ice at times, not in like a professional capacity of, oh God, is he going to say something that's going to get him sacked? But you're dealing with people trust you with some very delicate stories, and I think that would create a lot of pressure for some people in feeling that you've been trusted to to, you know, handle somebody's story and deliver that to the world.
Yeah, I mean, it means a lot that he came on to the podcast, and gave his story to me and then others. My overriding thought is how has he just from not talking at all, and then how has he just spilled the beans to me? I don't know if you may. I done another episode recently with a young lad, Kieran.
Yeah, I heard Kieran's one. Yeah,
I done my initial course with, and I don't know. I didn't put a lot of the video on, so I don't know how it sounded across on the whole thing on audio. But he got quite emotional when he started talking about he's not sure.
Yeah, I know. Because
of what his partner's going through, he doesn't know how to say what he's feeling. You know, new dad, young new dad, doesn't know. And his face when I looked at him, it looked like he was, really struggling. And again, after it, he said to me, I really appreciate actually us having a chat. And, that's all if we can just keep doing that, especially, I mean, I know you're obviously going to go on to Lisa's story in a minute, but when I interview men and they talk for the first time, if we can keep doing that, then that's a win. And ultimately, that's what I want to do. I also want to talk to people who are doing the amazing work as well. Like I said on last week's episode, talking to chums who are doing stuff with kids, mental health, and
how do you navigate that yourself as well, though? Because I often feel when I've had guests on who take you down similar rabbit holes, and sometimes it takes me by complete surprise because it's not necessarily something we intended on speaking about. But like you say, when you get into a conversation with people and they feel that they can trust you and you start developing a lot of empathy, a lot of sympathy, a lot of rapport with that person, some stuff just starts coming out of the closets and you have to kind of catch it as it falls out. Because I often think, especially when I listen to some of your stuff, somebody's going through, or they've been through a battle, or it's a little bit like going around somebody's house and you go, hello mate, you want to, you're saying you had a problem in the cellar. And they go, yeah, let's go for a walk, Matt. And they take you on a story down into the valley. They take you on a story down into the cellar. And it's a little bit like, there's a kind of an overarching holistic view when we talk about the emergency services as a whole. You onboard some of that. You have to be there in the moment with them and still sustain a connection. You have to onboard that trauma to a certain extent. Otherwise, if you weren't connecting with the person, then you wouldn't be able to sustain the conversation. Similar to an incident, you have to go somewhere. And even though you're not the one in the car crash, you're not the one in losing their house, you're not the one who's just seen a partner, lose their life. You are there with them. You are onboarding that trauma. And how did you balance that? Because you've been very open about some of the challenges that you faced. You're onboarding that trauma every time you have a conversation.
I think probably it's on some aspects it's relatable to stuff I've gone through. So to that I know already, one, how they might be feeling, and two, how it can affect you. I mean, I've gone down routes of being a mental health first aider and doing a mental health awareness course. It's nothing to shout about. They're entry level courses, because I do want that balance of, I want to educate myself a bit more on what mental health is, what we need to do to make things better, and what certain conditions can come with and certain disorders can give you. But like, if me and Beck might be having a conversation about something, and she'll say, "Oh, don't talk to me like a mental health first aider, or something like that," and I'm like, "Oh,
stop diagnosing me, Matt. Stop diagnosing me."
And that's I don't want to fall into that trap of interviewing people and then they're going, "Are you a counsellor now?"
Mate, it's hard. You can't switch it off. I have it with line manager. I don't necessarily spend a lot of time with my line managers because of how our structure fits. But when I sit with them, every couple of minutes they'll probably go, "Nah, I don't want you coaching me, Pete," or they'll say, "I don't. I'm here for your benefit. I'm here for your benefit." Yeah. And I am sincerely interested in people, though, and you are as well. And when you are sincerely interested in people, you do develop in a subconscious art of the way you ask questions.
Yeah, it's. I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I do. I say enjoy loosely because obviously sometimes you do have to hear some tough stuff. But like I said to you about interviewing other people, interesting people. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of. He's got a Facebook page, Newfoundlands.
Yeah,
he's got the big dog, Newfoundland dog.
Pete.
So he was in the magazine Emergency Services magazine a little while ago. And that's the first time I saw him. So I reached out to him and said, "Is this you're helping people with PTSD with friends?" And to me, like, I love my dogs, stuff like that. I was like, "This is amazing what he's doing," you know. So I reached out to him, and that's one of the ones that I haven't chased back up to sort out. But just people that are doing amazing stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I just want to talk to
you ever met Pete?
people that are doing that. And then,
did you meet him?
I haven't. No.
Oh, he's a lovely guy. I've spent time with the dogs. I think he had about 9 at one point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah, massive things. So there's something to do with the way their skin is and how thick their hair is. They effectively create an additional flotation capacity when they get in the water. And I could literally climb on one of those dogs, right, and they don't sink. And they're fantastic. He's done drills with them where he will tow back in a boat. He can tow people back in. And he does a lot of work with children with learning difficulties and helping them learn to swim. It's an amazing stuff that he's doing. Because obviously a lot of people that work with him are in the emergency services. He's got obviously a past in the emergency services himself. He's got paramedics and firefighters that work with him. And they're gorgeous animals. They're bloody massive. They're all at the emergency services show. There's about 4 of them there.
Yeah. Yeah, just got to talk about this community. You know what I mean? Like, know him.
He's such an incredible guy. He built a swimming pool for them during lockdown.
Did he?
For the dogs, with a ramp to go up and get in because they're so big. You don't want them jumping up and down. They just smash their hips to death. But he is such an incredible guy. You said that, when we were talking about Steve's story, I always, no matter how empathetic you are, I feel like it can be difficult, if not impossible, to truly understand what it's like to go through suicidal ideation unless you've experienced it yourself. So it's not surprising that, as a species, we have a visceral desire. We have a strong survival instinct. And it's hard to see how anyone who hasn't gone through it themselves could understand somebody's desire to die, somebody's desire to end their life. And this is something you have spoken to people about. What have been some of the common themes when you've been having those discussions?
Honestly, I don't understand it. I still don't understand it fully because the lowest point I've probably been at was when I had pissed all my money up the wall. Me and Beck weren't together anymore. I had a 6-month-old daughter, and I was in some grubby little house I was living in round the corner from their house that I was just paying a mate for to stay there. I think I had like a chair in the living room. Like, is that bad? But I sometimes wonder why when I then talk to other people who have been in similar situations. I can honestly, hand on heart, say I've never ever considered suicide, ever. And I think I was really low at some point, but I can't understand why. Part of me thinks I'd be too scared of death to do it, But the most people say, I think for Steve, he'd reached the lowest of lows, and no one knew about it. He didn't want to, and he felt like he's not worth anything to anyone, and he'd be better off if he just wasn't here. It's a funny thing, the mind, isn't it? How you can get that low that actually you can't see any other way out than actually just ending it and thinking that everyone will be better off if you go.
Do you ever think about it in reverse? And what I mean by that is, so the other side of it is, do you fear death of other people, i.e. your children or your partner?
Do I?
Yeah. Have you ever gone through the process of what you would do if you lost a child or if your partner died? God forbid.
I haven't overly. I haven't really considered it. I mean,
I think about it regularly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Might seem a bit dark to people.
No, I mean it. So you're planning.
I don't mean like doing it myself. I don't linger with my partner at the top of the stairs and go, just fancy it. But I think it gives you a different perspective. When I kiss my daughter goodnight, or I go in and she's asleep or something like that, I look at her and I think, what would life be like if you died tomorrow? What would be, you hear about. I spoke to somebody a long time ago who had their son. I get this right. It's called SADS. Sudden Adult Death Syndrome. Have you heard of that?
Yep.
Yeah, because you have it with children as well. It's also known as cot death in a similar way, where there's you don't know why somebody's passed away, but they've just passed away. There's no trauma as such, and I that kind of helped me come to terms with it, because people say, "Oh, well, how is your kid going?" They might just be gone, And I like to go through that mental process because it helps me to appreciate people. You know, when you worry about all the stupid small stuff, or your kid's done this, or your kid's drawn on a wall or whatever, it doesn't mean you just let them do whatever you want, but it kind of grounds me. And I always think of this when we go to instances where you go to a house and the house is just absolutely just unreal, how the level of deprivedness that people, the socioeconomic level, and just the way that they're living and the way that people are treating each other. And you think, how has it gotten to this situation? Because people took stuff for granted, and the small little things soon became the big things, and they forgot about the reason they ever started out together. You know, so I regularly remind myself that we're not here forever. One day you are going to die. My partner, my children may die before me. You know, I might die, but I'm not really that bothered if I die, because I'm not going to know about it. So it is irrelevant. It's going to be a pain that everybody else has to go through. Not saying that I'm super important. You know, it won't be a packed church, but they're going to have to go through it. Whereas I think people should familiarize them. They should flirt with the idea, and they should at least think about, that morbidity, that fact that we are not here forever.
No, and I mean, I don't have it anymore, but I know when I was younger, I could be in bed and I could think about, and it would be one day, I used to picture myself looking down on earth, right, and thinking, it's looking for me and I'm not there anymore.
Yeah.
That was when I was, when I was a teenager, stuff like that. It used to get my heart racing laying in bed.
Yeah.
And I couldn't it was almost like a panic attack. I'm like, that don't make sense to me. Like, because obviously when you start looking up and out and past everything, it's like, okay, but where does it go? I mean, we could go into a whole other conversation on this.
We are but a whisper of a blink of a hiccup of time in space.
You know what I mean?
We are so insignificant. It is, and that helps me conceptualize stuff. Lisa, I wanted to ask you about Lisa because she had an incredible story about her brother Paul, unfortunately taking his life. And for people that haven't heard it, give us the whistle. No, it sounds horrible. Give us a whistle stop tour of Lisa's story, because that was quite a surreal one to listen to.
Yeah, Lisa, she's absolutely lovely. She doesn't far off from us, actually. And she's a friend of the family, and our kids are friends. And just, she'd heard, I'd started the podcast, I think she'd spoken to my half and said about, that was one of the first interviews I'd done, really. So it was pretty terrifying. I remember having as many notes as I could up on the wall behind me, like just scribbles on it,
Yeah.
And she come on, and again, it was really the first time she'd spoken about it in detail to anyone. And it was to be honest, it was just one of those, he'd always had his issues over the years with depression and things like that, I think. And that was a hard one for me to listen to, because I know Lisa's daughter or daughters, and hearing how close they were over the years, and when she was growing up, and she was only a little girl anyway, and it got too much for him, and he took his own life, and that was
how old was he?
I think he was 30, 35. I'm trying to remember now.
No, I think he was. I think he was 33.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was there or thereabouts.
Yeah, it's similar to my age.
Scary, isn't it?
Yeah, it is scary, and I think I've said to her in person since, like, that's not old, but the numbers are there. I mean, she talks quite openly about the things she'd learned about it since, and stats of men under 50, and it's the biggest killer, it's a real thing. It's not some silly stat that, that is a fact. Under 50-year-olds, the biggest killer is suicide. So that leads you on to, what the hell are we doing wrong? Like, how can we change this stigma that's surrounded it? And it needs to start from us talking about it more. I mean, you and me could talk about physical health all day long. I'm not.
I'm
we talk about it.
significantly more interested in mental health. Not saying that we're going to offer, but and that's what people think when they, oh yeah, Pete does fitness, blah 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 blah. You know what? That stuff's really easy. It's just a tool. It's just the thing that helps me recalibrate and rebalance. But there's something so significant about that age bracket that you spoke about there, and I always think about it like, You know when DVDs used to be about, and
I do remember them.
Yeah, you know, if you said like, I used to have a colossal DVD collection because I love stories. You know, I love storytelling and the art of learning things through the process of stories. And I used to have massive amount of DVDs. You know, like a whole wall. It's something I developed for ages, and then it was completely useless, so I got rid of it. And if you had like 500 DVDs to pick from, and you had a date round or something like that, and you go, hey, which DVD do you want to watch? You could end up spending 2 hours picking a DVD. Because there's so many options. But if you've only got 5 DVDs, you pick one quite quickly. Yeah. And I think when I lay that template onto where we are in life now, it's a little bit like walking down a corridor, and there used to be like 10 doors. Yeah. There'd be 10 doors you could go through, and at the end of the corridor, there's the theoretical end is where you're 25, 35, whatever. But it's the theory is at that point in life, you should have got your shit together. People think they're like, you should have had at least a plan of something you're going to do. You should have picked a DVD by now. And it's not going to be forever, so don't worry about it. You're just going to pick it. You're going to watch it for an hour and a half. But now we have so many things we can do in life. And that becomes the paralysis of analysis. You know, people have so many things they could do in life. And then when they find themselves doing nothing because they keep procrastinating, they keep walking down the corridor and they're like, no, I don't want to go work in a factory. So they walk past that door. I don't want to be in the police. I don't want to be a mechanic. I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to be an accountant. And that used to be it. They were like the 10 options, or, you know, there was a certain amount of options, 30, 40 years ago. Now there's another 700 doors. Do you want to create your own business? Do you want to be an entrepreneur? Do you want to do this? Do you want to be a whatever? Do you want to be a celebrity? Do you want to be a... And they keep, door. And then they get halfway down the corridor and they go, I haven't picked anything yet. I'm 35. Yep. I can see the wall coming up at the end of this where everybody is just coming out of their doors and they're going into another door. They've done this for 5 years and now they're going and doing something else, and now they're going and do something else. I haven't done anything yet. And it's that self-imposed social pressure of failure to launch. I haven't picked a door. I feel like I should have done something by now, and I feel like I should have achieved something by now. And we create a real anxiety around, I'm 35, I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm 22. What have I done? And we compound that now with social media when we go, hey, millionaire by 25. Hey, I've changed the world by 21. I've invented this. I've got a bajillion, gazillion followers who all think my life's amazing and I'm only 19. What have you done? Bang. Yeah. And that weight just drowns people.
Yeah. And I mean, you look at, you're saying about social media, and that's another thing altogether. But I could, if I didn't know you, I could look up, I could have found your podcast on Instagram, seen how busy it is, and been like, and the supporters you've got and things like that, and been like, okay, this guy's made it. You know what I mean? Like, look how easy it is. Anyone can do that. But obviously, being in it, and when you do,
if I didn't know you better, Pete, I'd think you were successful.
But the thing is, what I mean is,
if I didn't know secretly you're an absolute shower. No, I'm joking. But yeah, I know what you're saying.
But if knowing you, I know how much graft you have to put in to do that. And I also know that if I want my podcast to get to another level of listeners and success, I've now got to put more determination and consistency into it. It doesn't just come, you can't just go and make a funny TikTok.
No.
And you will find someone who has a funny TikTok and it goes viral. But there's millions of them out there. Like, it's not just going to happen just because you think, I'll do that and I'll be minted, then I'll have loads of followers.
And it's equally how you define that success, because you could spend hours and hours, and sincerely, you could have the best whatever. You'd have the best podcast, you could have the best business, you could have the best art gallery. But if it's in the middle of the woods and nobody knows about it, it's going to be completely irrelevant as well. So there's that aspect of not procrastinating to the extent that you think that something needs to be perfect. You think it's got to be this, because from the outside looking in, everything looks a little bit better. You're comparing their highlight reel to your backstage.
Yeah, 100%.
I wanted to, the whole kind of a point, ironically, that we came on was that we wanted to get talking about this opinions that we have. One of the main things I wanted to ask your opinion about was that we looked at this report. We had 87% on a little while ago, and the report was entitled State of Mental Wellbeing on the Frontline. And as soon as I read it, I thought, I've got to ask Matt about this, because they'd surveyed over 10,000 emergency services workers. There was some crazy, scary outcomes from that. And I know it's something we both sort of went away and took a few notes on. and the sort of negative impact and poor mental health for the frontline workers. What did you take away from it? Because I know we've had a couple of conversations leading up to it, and we're like, dude, we're gonna have to have a proper chat about this because there's some stats in there.
Yeah, so there was the stats were one thing. I wasn't overly shocked, being someone who's maybe a bit more aware of the state of play.
You live in
I
this
don't know
space,
about you.
yeah.
I wasn't shocked. You know, I've interviewed a paramedic, a heart paramedic. I've interviewed a substance abuse recovery worker. So knowing now that we're in a pandemic, I know what stress heart paramedics and paramedics have been under. Even though I wasn't shocked, I'm sure people would be shocked. But there was some really good bits from the study. I like the bit they done with the. I think you even spoke about it with Andy on the episode. The 7 dimensions.
Yes.
Which breaks it down into 7 pieces with a lot of subtitles underneath that. I mean, I don't know if anybody could sustain all of them.
No. That's when it's kind of like you hear about the entrepreneur's lifestyle and they go, I wake up in the morning, I have my grass-fed chicken breast just before I do my 10 miles, which I'm doing on a ketogenic diet. And this is just before I meditate for an hour. And that's right before I start doing my diary. And then I listen to something motivational. And you're like, well, how many people have got these 12 hours spare in the morning that I'm missing?
Yeah, exactly. It made for an interesting read. There was a bit, what was it? You said, or Andy said about having that work-life balance and maybe saying to people, all right, well, after this time at night, you can't send emails or something like that. You know, that's how we're going to, it doesn't.
That's not going to work.
It actually, it needs to be even above that, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. It needs to be a completely culture change so that actually we're looking after each other. You can't just.
That's unrealistic. And that,
some people work, send an email at night.
Yeah, it echoes back to that discipline and sort of freedom aspect that I was speaking about, because you need to be able to discipline yourself to that whenever you say switch off time is, and that time can change every single day. It has to be a mindset shift that you develop the ability to put something down, because there'll always be something essential. Everything's essential. Everything's really important. Everything is, I need to hear about this immediately. This is a priority email. I need you to get back to me. We're a 24-hour service. We're a 24-hour society now. To somebody, everything's urgent.
Yeah, the one quote that did stand out to me was that if organisations spent £1 on wellbeing, they'd effectively get £4 return. Now, obviously, not every organisation, chief or whatever, has had this report land on their desk.
No.
I appreciate that. But I do think it's one thing you can take from this report is that we need to more to protect our employees and feel like that initially. But then to be, even if you have a foolproof system in place, people are still going to have mental health. Everyone's got mental health, but whether or not they start getting ill mental health, it might be from home life. Now, it's not the employer's responsibility to take care of the employee if they've got home life problems, but it makes for a good company if you can show that actually you do care about the people that are grafting for you day in, day out.
Yeah.
And to me, I mean, I've had personal experience with it being in this steering group. I'm in the mental health steering group for both local authority and the airport where I'm working. And the opinions are still not great. And I feel a bit out, especially the local authority. And I've got no issue saying this as it is. I feel like I'm like a thorn in those meetings because I'm boots on the ground. I'm not a politician, and sometimes I say things the way they should be said and not how they maybe want to be said in these meetings. And I've said that to guys off record as well. Like I said, I know sometimes I don't come across the right way, but it infuriates me that everyone can see what we need to do and what needs to be improved. And we need to have people, our crew managers, our watch managers, with a bit more training, you know?
They've got to have a bit more training, but like you say, drawing that line between when does it become your responsibility? Because I always say to people, you've got to work twice as hard on yourself as you do on the job. It is personal development. How are you living? You know, are you standing on guard at the gates of your mind? What are you letting in there? What is affecting you? You know, I think some people mentally skid into work mentally. In a ball of flames with something they've just been dealing with everything they've just thrown into their mind, with something that they've just observed or consumed from a social media perspective, and they come crashing into work, not ready with the level of emotional awareness that is going to allow the best version of themselves to show up. Because I don't think we're empowering ourselves. Yes, we have an obligation, and I think, you know, what the fact you double clicked on that, you know, £4, £1 analogy and helping people quantify the outcome of supporting people with their mental health and with their own sort of mindset, and how that will deliver a much more effective and well-rounded person at work. That's an important statistic, and that will hopefully get a lot of people on board. But we have got to take a lot of personal accountability for the sort of stuff that we're allowing into our minds.
What I mean by I agree with that 100%. You know, we're all, and I think when you get to the age I'm at in the last few years, I've been working on my resilience, my mental health, and making sure I'm on an even keel and making sure that I can cope with things on the job. An example of something that's happened recently is we've got 2 new guys at a station. I won't go into too much detail. And they are not long out of school-ish. So you're talking 19, 20. Their first job recently was a car fire. 50-year-old woman and a 16-year-old daughter, fully alight. They were first on scene, both of them in BA. Not a great, obviously, as you can imagine, that's one of the more horrific things to see on the job.
Stinks as well.
Both. And I'd heard about it through the grapevine that that's the job they'd been on. And my initial thing was, I'm going to give them a bell and see how they're doing. Obviously, we have the hot debrief. I know about the process a bit more now. So they had a hot debrief with our OIC. He said, obviously, we've got the EAP there if you want to use that, blah, blah, blah. Left it at that, as far as I'm aware. Don't quote me on it. I phoned both of them, and they both texted me basically saying, can't get the images out of our heads, this, that, and the other. And they weren't that great the next morning either. So my thing is, like, why is occupational health not giving them a courtesy call? Because as we know, when people are suffering mental health, they won't pick up the phone. So why haven't they? So I messaged someone in occupational health and said, are these guys getting a call this morning, just a courtesy call, just to see how they're doing? No, not unless they're referred. Referred by who? Well, when the hot debrief's done, if they get referred, that's when I'm talking about training. So the watch manager that didn't refer them, they're fine now, and it was an issue. I just wanted to sort of nip it in the bud. I thought, you don't know what else these people have got going on. They're young lads. First time I've seen something as traumatic as that. And that's where he said, well, no, only if I refer them. And I thought, you look at their ages. It's one of their first jobs. They're straight out of school. You know, they've been watching, I don't know, Brooklyn Nine-Nine up until now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the way it works is, yes, they can be referred to occupational health. I don't know what your system's like where you are, but trim only comes in after 48 hours. So you cannot refer them to trim until after 48 hours. And that sort of just stuck with me a little bit. I was like, that doesn't seem right. Like, if someone is suffering, and then they go to that job, because we're all proud firefighters. We like to get in there and get stuck in at the job, regardless of what's going on in our personal life. And the discussion I had with occupational health was, they said, well, a bit of shock is normal and it's okay. Okay, that's fine. If you look up the symptoms of shock, that can be anger, irritation, fainting, tiredness. I know for a fact that one of them firefighters, 2.5 hours later, drove across county in his car to go to work. And I'm like, so with all those symptoms you can get from shock, you're happy for him to drive to work because he's on call. He's an on-call firefighter, so he's gone off to work now. Well, didn't really get an answer from that. That's my thinking, is we just need to, most watches are very good, aren't they? We all look after each other. I think it's pretty good on a fire station.
Most are, but I think that's, if, like you say, if we don't take, if we don't take these things that you're saying, if we don't take the things that we're hearing a bit more seriously, we're benefiting off the back end of people that came from an era with a lot of strong watch culture, and we're hemorrhaging those experiences and those sort of approaches to life, because these people back then came from a very different generation. Now we live in a bit more of a separated world. We say we live in a more connected world. We live in a more connected world from a technological perspective, but some people have never felt so alone as they do now. And I think we don't want to lull ourselves into a false sense of security by the belief that watch culture is strong, the watch is there to support them. Yes, that should be the case, but don't take it for granted, because We're a very different group of people now than we were back then.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I mean, you can talk about what needs to change until the sun goes down for, as long as you want. But gradually, like when I spoke to Chums the other day, the Mental Health for Children charity around this area, they said, you are starting to see more of it in schools now.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that is where it needs to start. There's stuff we teach in schools that is irrelevant for real life. I mean, my daughter, we joke about it because she talks about God and all that sort of stuff. And she's like, oh, yeah, this, that, and the other. And I'll go, yeah, I don't really believe it. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, look, that's just what I believe. Yeah. I was like, oh, because she asked to be christened. That's what it was. She come home because they learned about it at school.
Fair enough.
Can I be christened? And I said, you can when you're older. I said, when you're older, if you learn about more of it and you believe that's what you want to do, 100% do it. I said, but no, I'm not saying we can go and get you christened. No, that's something you can do when you're older. Things like that. I think we should learn about the history of our world and things like that. But we need to be teaching our kids what real life's like when you leave school.
100%, mate. 100%.
And building up their resilience so that when they leave the school and someone actually goes, you better be at work at 8 o'clock on Monday, you're not like, oh, sorry, I don't, just cowering. Yeah. I've got a job to do now. That's just how life is. That's what I've got to do. Mm-hmm. Until that, we've got to go through years and years of generations now, however long it takes for the cycle to go around. But
it is that cycle.
That level where it's part of the curriculum.
I saw a great box analogy of like a cycle of, and you hear it spoken about on a few other things. I think Joe Rogan's mentioned it a few times about we are heading into, and we're kind of living in, really, I suppose it is hard now. We're living in a time now of harder times, which is going to create harder, more resilient people. But those harder, more resilient people will create a safer time. But it won't be until that safer time where these people are going to feel supported and feel helped. We've got to go through that valley at the minute. And like you say, we've come now from a period, if you look at the other side of the cycle, where softer times created softer people. We went through a period where you didn't have to win. You didn't have to show up and deliver value at work. You just had to show up. Do you know what I mean? You just got a participation medal. You didn't have to deliver value. And we are sleepwalking our children off a cliff where they think it's okay just to show up. They think it's okay just to be part of the team and that sort of stuff. That's not how real life works. Someone is going to shake their finger in your face and tell you you're shit if you don't deliver value. You need to know that that is coming around the corner, and we need to give people that resiliency to be able to deal with it. Otherwise, we're lulling them into a sort of false sense of security. And we're gonna, and that's where we're gonna get people in their mid to late 20s, 30s feel the ground fall away from them because we've built a false platform for them to stand on, and that's not how life works. It's a sad thing to have to. I always say to people, don't let your education get in the way of your own personal development. Don't allow what you've done in school to stop you to continuing to grow. That was designed to deliver you into a system where you worked in a factory or you worked in something like that. That's not the world that we live in all the time now. You need to be, that's just the base level. And some of that you don't need to take with you. Some of it's not going to serve you. You need to go on and to continue to develop yourself far beyond that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, prime example, my eldest is, she's 9 now. She's going through that phase where she likes something new every week,
Yeah.
But one thing she absolutely loves is skateboarding. She's just gone mad for it. And, we've got her a skateboard and we've got her some, knee pads and things like that. We said, we'll go take her to the skate park. And then before she's even trying to go in a straight line, she's trying to do all these tricks. And I went, what are you doing? I'm trying to do it. And I went, you can't even roll. I don't know what terminology is. You can't even roll in a straight line yet. Oh, no, but I saw someone doing this on this kid's YouTube or whatever. I think it was Skylar Brown who got the young Olympian that won bronze. And I said, you've got to learn the basics. And obviously it's boring, the basics, you've got to learn the foundations. I went, I know it sucks. I said, but you've got to do that first. Once you've got control of that board, then everything else will fall into place. I said, but it doesn't come without practice. And then she wouldn't ask to go for a week. She's had the switch and other stuff to go on.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I could do this last week. And I went, yeah, but you're watching that Skylar on YouTube. I said, she's been practicing every day.
Mm-hmm.
Our kids can do whatever they want, can't they? but if they really want to go for something,
oh mate, it's the best time. That's how valuable time is. The time that they have, and the opportunities and the accelerated way that things are developing in the world now. It's never been the best time ever. They're faced with some colossal challenges, no doubt, but they've never had so many resources.
So yeah, it's just about obviously you got for that. Going back to that, like, it's not given that you're going to be successful. Believe me, people still have to work for it.
Yeah,
you've got like you say, you've got the most opportunities we've ever had with the stuff and technology we've got now, but you've got to put that time in.
And don't allow that word potential to make you think that you haven't got to work for it. Otherwise you will end up that 33, 35-year-old who potential means nothing. It's a bit like ideas. Nobody pays you for your ideas. They pay you for your output. No one's paying you for your potential. You know what I mean? We've got to be so careful with that word. I keep getting told how much potential the podcast has and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but then you need to go through 2 years of people not answering your phone calls, not answering your emails, not showing up for calls, and then just people just going, who are you? No, I ain't got time for it. You've got to keep pushing that boulder uphill just to come back the next day and realize it's rolled back down to the bottom and start again and start again and start again. That's how you develop a blade. You've got to keep beating on that tool. You've got to keep smashing it. You've got to keep pushing it back into the iron and forging it and then hammering it and hammering it. You've got to build a big appetite for eating shit. You've just got to keep swallowing it and swallowing it and swallowing it. And then eventually you'll start creating something out of the side of it.
That's the goal.
Matt, I always love our chats, mate. I always love catching up with you.
Yeah, okay.
You're walking that thin red line, and I love what you do, mate. It takes a lot of bravery to go in and have the conversations that you're having with people, and I think it's really powerful. That's why I like supporting the stuff that you do, and that's why I like having you on, because I really think you're very much in the trenches of it, and it's got to be difficult every time to, like we said earlier, go down into the cellar with people and hear them talk about the stuff that they've gone through, and then have the bravery to come out and share it with the world whilst trying to strike your own balance, mate. So I think it's really powerful what you do, and I really feel privileged that you come on and share it.
No, I'd say to any support I get, specifically from you and being the guy, probably 2 or 3 main people that will back me up. And I'd say, and I've met through his podcast. It's been brilliant. And I've got it's my shirt there. Actually, it's your badge.
I love it. I see it.
That having that shirt made and then putting a couple of supporters on it, knowing that I had them backing me, it means a lot. And it shows that there is people out there that want to listen and people that want to push for the stigma to end around this mental health. So I just need to be more consistent next year, because I know from looking at the numbers that actually when I launch an episode, a lump of people do tune in.
They do. I'm one of them.
So I've just got to, I appreciate it. But it just means that I know, and this is one of my points that when I started the podcast is, I want one out every week, because people are going to be expecting that to pop up saying this is available now, and there is the people out there to talk to. So I just got to get my shit together and get on with
it. Mate, the next thing we have to do is, like what I was sort of referred to here, we have not done anything in person. The next challenge that you do, let's make it something we can do together, and let's push that public accountability. I'm going to put this on there. I'm not going to edit this bit out, and we will do something together. I want to do more stuff supporting mental health. The charity is one of our media partners. We've had a bunch of people on from there, and the work that you do is invaluable to that whole overarching aspect of it. That's why I love to keep plugging into it. You kind of rebalance me and refocus me. I kind of feel like whenever I have a conversation with you, you recalibrate my moral compass. So I want us to do some more stuff together.
That's a lot of pressure.
So keep going, mate. I'm listening. People are listening, and what you're doing is really powerful. Send my love to the good lady as well. All right.
Will do, mate.
See you soon.
Take care, mate.
The Firefighters Podcast is a global podcast seeking to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operators. Through a series of wide-ranging conversations celebrating those within our sector, we seek to encourage and support this incredible group of people. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield, and I speak with individuals from all walks of life who I sincerely believe can add value to or develop those who have chosen this life path. Please support your emergency services wherever you are in the world, and thank you for listening.